Obviously, I'm being sarcastic, are so mature, both the countries, that whenever there is a debacle between India and Pakistan, we see people coming out, beating their chests and wanting to go to war. But at the same time, there are tweets and memes that go on either side, making fun of those people who do that. So I think that it's all very mature, and there needs to be a much more mature response to conflicts. That's the only effect it will have. So all of this is a lot of chest beating, and the people who really suffer are the people on both sides of the divide. Now, we have interviewed families that are divided families, where a husband is in India or the wife is in Pakistan, or vice versa. And we've even interviewed one woman who had to let go of her children. I mean, the children had a visa to were Pakistani nationals, but she was an Indian national, and she couldn't come into Pakistan, and the children could not stay on in India.
We've seen that whenever tensions flare up between India and Pakistan, the first casualty is free access to information, and especially when it comes to Kashmir. So, how do you think communication blackouts during such escalation impact civil liberties and the ability to document human rights violations?
Well, I mean, blacking out information actually gives birth to fake news and propaganda. And wherever we've seen information being blacked out, usually for journalists who are professional journalists, it gives room, and the vacuum is often filled by either fake news or propaganda. So it's counterproductive to ban information at a time where there's conflict. In fact, there should be increased sharing of information on both sides, so there is no misinformation, there's no misunderstandings based on which governments, we have seen in the past, even taking action based on misinformation coming from one other country, tempers flaring as a result of that. In India, Pakistan, obviously, I'm being sarcastic, are so mature, both the countries, that whenever there is a debacle between India and Pakistan, we see people coming out, beating their chests and wanting to go to war. But at the same time, there are tweets and memes that go on either side, making fun of those people who do that. So I think that it's all very mature, and there needs to be a much more mature response to conflicts. For example, India has unilaterally decided to hold in abeyance the Indus Water Treaty. They can hold the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. It absolutely, from what I've heard from water experts, it will have no effect on Pakistan, no real effect. What will happen is that the information that is exchanged between the water commissions, that may not take place. But in any case, we were getting that information a little too late, maybe a week or 2 weeks late. So that's the only effect it will have. So all of this is a lot of chest beating, and the people who really suffer are the people on both sides of the divide. Now, we have interviewed families that are divided families, where a husband is in India or the wife is in Pakistan, or vice versa. And we've even interviewed one woman who had to let go of her children. I mean, the children had a visa to were Pakistani nationals, but she was an Indian national, and she couldn't come into Pakistan, and the children could not stay on in India. So what happens to these divided families? I mean, you can't wish away the fact that we are that we are neighbors, that we share a boundary, that we share a destiny, that we have divided families on either side of the divide, that we were one country. And as a result of that, there are serious humanitarian crises that develop, not just in Kashmir or in Balochistan, because those are the collateral damage of an India-Pakistan war. Often for them, it is Kashmir. As you have seen, there's collective punishment going on in Kashmir. Homes have been raided, and for us, it's Balochistan, and people are accused of being raw agents, and none of these accusations are in any way supported by solid evidence. And when we do see these cases come before the court, they are often dismissed because they can never be proved. So apart from chest beating and arresting people on false accusations, or giving them collective punishment, razing their homes to the ground, what really has India and Pakistan achieved through all these skirmishes in the past?
when it comes to Indo-Pak tensions, it's usually the civilians who often bear the brunt. So my next question is, since we are talking about journalism and since we are talking about communication blackouts, you've reported extensively on Indo-Pak tensions, and as you just mentioned, the interviews. So in these tense moments, what unique challenges do you think journalists face when trying to cover sensitive cross-border issues fairly and safely? And I'm asking this because today India blocked 16 Pakistani news channels. So how do you see that?
See, it depends from government to government. I can remind you that when the Mumbai attacks happened, at that time there was no BJP government, there was a Congress government, and their response was far more mature than the current government's response. You don't shoot the messenger when you can't do anything else, and that's really what has happened. That they have blocked 16 channels. We have seen the Indian government become a lot like what General Ziaul Haq's government was, and a lot like what we are. I mean, we are all reflecting each other. It's all a race to the gutter between India and Pakistan when it comes to freedom of expression. And especially the Narendra Modi government has shown that it has very low tolerance for free expression. And so it has gone ahead and blocked those 16 channels. What purpose will it serve? Will it bring the perpetrators of terrorism to justice? Of course not. Will it resolve anything else in India? Of course not. There are mechanisms that are available between the two countries that they have agreed to in the past, whether that's the Simla Agreement or any other agreement, which they can use in order to address the issue of terrorism. There are non-state actors between Pakistan and India, and they have always held India and Pakistan hostage. But India and Pakistan has also held the rest of South Asia hostage. And the reason South Asia has remained one of the least connected regions in the world is simply because of India and Pakistan. The fact that we are unable to trade with each other, unable to move forward as a bloc, unable to lift up our population out of poverty is because of these skirmishes between India and Pakistan. And I'm afraid that Pakistan has played its role in this, and so has now increasingly India, because we have a far more right-wing, intolerant government now in Delhi.
The narrative so far, there's been coming to the picture with India and Pakistan both being nuclear-armed states and the warmongering on both the sides. How dangerous do you think it is when we see this, when we see this warmongering escalate after incidents like the Pahalgam attack? And how real do you think is the risk of miscalculation when you talk about warmongering?
It's very real. The miscalculation, what can go wrong between India and Pakistan. There are lots of non-state actors between India and Pakistan which were once supported by the states that can make things go wrong. Let me give you a small example. When the People's Party government came into power and Yusuf Raza Gilani was the Prime Minister, Pranab Mukherjee at that time was the Foreign Affairs Minister. There was a call that went from one of the jails in Sindh. I think it was Hyderabad jail. And it was directly to President Zardari. So they knew all the privacy notes or whatever codes that are required to get to President Zardari. They already knew that. So that was very highly classified information that they had. And the other person impersonated himself as Pranab Mukherjee. And it was after the Mumbai attacks. And in fact, Dawn was the one who reported that. And he said that I'm going to threaten you with war. I'm threatening you with war. And this was in response to the Mumbai attacks. Now, Prime Minister Gilani gave me an interview and said that Pranab Mukherjee has made a call threatening me to go to war. Now, when that interview was played, the Indian said, but there was no call made by Pranab Mukherjee. Pranab Mukherjee was very confused that there was no call made, and everybody was super confused. It was later discovered that it was Umar Sheikh, the accused in the Daniel Pearl murder, and also accused of 9/11, also accused of other operations within India, including the Parliament attack, who made that call from Hyderabad jail while he was in prison in Hyderabad jail for the murder of Daniel Pearl. So, who gave the phone number to Umar Sheikh? Who made him make that call? Who gave him that kind of classified information still is unclear. But these things have happened in the past, and I can tell you that between India and Pakistan, there are lots of non-state actors that are extremely powerful that want things to go very south and very quickly.
So even now, there's been a lot of loud calls from the Indian politicians and media for punitive action against Pakistan. From your perspective, how much of this is political posturing, and how much of this poses a serious risk for escalation?
This current crisis?
Yes, so we've seen in the Indian media and as well as from Indian politicians, the calls for punitive action against Pakistan. So, how much do you think this is political posturing, and how much of this poses a serious risk of, escalation?
I don't at all see it as posturing. I think that there is a serious risk for escalation in the days to come, and we will be watching the situation very carefully. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to 10 leaders of the country, of the world, and they are making a case for attacking Pakistan. Over 100 diplomats have been consulted in Delhi. So it's very clear that they are making a case for attacking Pakistan, and that is the New York Times story today. So I think that we should brace ourselves for more to come, unfortunately. And now we will have to see how Pakistan responds, whether that will be measured like we saw in 2019, where Pakistan shot down 2 Indian aircrafts and captured 1 soldier who was then returned, Abhinandan, in a goodwill gesture. Will Pakistan retaliate with a measured response, or will it be an all-out response? Khwaja Asif certainly seems to think that there will be an all-out response, but I do believe that that will not be an option for Pakistan, simply because I don't think that the world wants escalation of tensions. And China, Iran, Saudi Arabia are all talking to one another and to these 2 countries to ratchet down the temperature.
Okay, so historically, whenever in India and Pakistan tensions have risen, these crises have been balanced out, like you said, with the help of friends. And with the help of friends and back-channel diplomacy. So given the current situation, do you think that there's still any space left for de-escalation or dialogue, or India is preparing for something more serious?
If you ask me, I think that India is preparing for something more serious. I think Narendra Modi means business. He is somebody who has in the past also taken on Pakistan, who's shown zero tolerance for what he says is terrorism, that he has often felt not the need to present anybody with any evidence. And he has moved forward, like we saw in the Pulwama attack, he moved forward and did make that stride. So he is much more brash in his decisions than the Congress government. And at this point, even the Congress party has said that we will stand with the government of India, whatever decisions that they have to take. Pakistan has insisted that there can be a third-party intervention and an independent inquiry. But even in the past, India has dismissed such overtures.
So what do you think that leaves us with?
Unfortunately, not very good news in the coming few days. I think we should brace ourselves, hope for the best, insist on restarting a dialogue. On if it is going to be on terrorism, it should be on terrorism. But there needs to be a dialogue between the 2 countries. I think it's Pakistan and India have held not only their own populations, but the populations of South Asia behind. And I think this new generation, the concept of borders have anyway vanished because of social media. People are already engaged with each other. You don't have to be physically in a place or visit another place to experience that society. So people are experiencing those societies over the internet. And the purpose of containing people within borders the social media has already thrown that out of the window. It's high time that the traditional old politicians realize what a new young population between India and Pakistan wants and moves forward towards lifting their people out of poverty and providing jobs and trade, rather than always warmongering and hanging on to egos of men who may want to settle things domestically in order to move to be seen as successful.
Okay, I think the younger generation in both Pakistan and India do want a war, but they want a meme war rather than an actual war. Thank you so much, Muniza, for joining us.
I don't think so. I disagree. I don't think young people are interested in war. I think young people are interested in opportunities.
Yeah, so meme opportunities, I guess. Thank you, Muniza, for joining us.
Thank you.